Hello, my name is Daniel Hodap, and we have a wonderful call today with Jim McCarty and Gabriel Lugo, and talking about the content of the first book of the raw material. Hello, Jim.
Hello, Daniel.
How is you doing over there in Kentucky?
Well, our weather's finally getting to be nice and sunny and warm. We're up back in the 50s and 60s. We don't have any more snow, so I have some flowers coming up around my yard, and I'm looking forward to an early spring. We've been having our public channeling meditations on the second and fourth Saturday of each month, and they're going well, getting to meet a lot of new folks from around the country. And so everything looks good.
So, and the preparation for the homecomings, I think they are also in fully progress.
Oh, yeah, that's right. As most of you probably know, we're having a new location for our homecoming this year. It's in central Kentucky, about an hour and a half drive from here. And we're doing that because last year's homecoming filled up within an hour and we had 30 on the wait list. So we need to be able to accommodate more people than my home can do. So this place in central Kentucky, Terrapin Hill, could probably accommodate 1,000 because it's got 400 acres and a lot of different places to meet. But I'm not sure exactly what the limit on the registration will be, but it'll be at least 60 or so.
I'm very glad that you can make it there as well. I know that you are very busy in your house, in your garden all the time. So I'm looking much forward to see you there. So today we want to talk about the first book of the raw material, which we have just completed in the Law of One YouTube Telegram group with our great and amazing host, Gabriel Lugo. And I would like to ask you, Jim, is there anything in general which you can a bit express more of the beginning with the channeling, and how was the preparation before and after the recap? Would you like to talk about a little bit in general about it?
So you want to know in general throughout all those first 26 sessions what we did or how the first session came about?
Yeah, in general, how the preparation was for the first session, and then later on, in general, what was your routine before and after the sessions?
Okay. The first session was a surprise. We had no idea that Ra was going to be contacting our group. As a matter of fact, I was out shopping for groceries. I wasn't there for the first session. Carla and Don were teaching a student from the Sunday night meditation how to channel. So instead of the usual Latwii coming through, a fifth entity, those of Ra came through and began to speak. And I think Don was very surprised about that and totally excited because when I got back, well, the first thing I walked into the living room where they were having their session, where we always had our public channeling meditations, and I had groceries in my hand. So I interrupted the first session. And in 1.9, they say we must deepen this instrument's state because I interrupted it. So when the session was over, I just asked Don, well, how'd it go? He said, this is it. This is what we've been waiting for 19 years. Could you transcribe this right away? I said, now? He said, yes. And I'd never seen Don excited before. He was a cool as a cucumber guy. Nothing upset him. But he wasn't upset at all. He was excited. So I got it, started transcribing, and I knew that this was information that was beyond anything we'd ever had before. And so I got excited. And he was out in the hall. My room and the office were back around from the living room. So he was pacing outside the office, waiting for every page to come out of the electric typewriter that I had at the time. So after we got going on sessions, we moved the sessions from the living room where we had our public channeling meditations into a room just beside Dawn's. And we dedicated that room. It became the raw room. And it had a bathroom right next to it. So anybody that needed to go before the session could do that, mostly Carla. And so after we got going, Ra gave us the general principle of how we could walk the circle of one and provide protection for Carla while she was in the trance state. And out of her body is what we discovered later. She was not in her body. She was with Ra. So we did that every session. As the time went on, we looked at the session before, after I transcribed it, to see the information that we got from Ra. and decided on questions we'd ask for the next session. But frequently, what would happen is that after Ra would give the answer to one question, then Don would have, go in another direction because they would give us another piece of information we didn't know anything about. So, and also we would always meditate before in the living room before we had the Ra session in the Ra room. And occasionally Don would get some questions in his meditation that we would ask there. So most of the time, the questions we decided upon would get asked, but sometimes we got off on another journey and had to travel that for a while because Ra just, they would answer in such a specific way that we didn't always know what was going to happen. And so it was a very inspiring experience.
Yeah, thank you very much. I took a chance last year also to sneak around the house where the raw material was channeled. So
Oh yeah,
this,
yeah, yeah. It's changed some. They've divided up some of the property that we used to have there. It's a subdivision right next to where we used to have our property, and so it makes it easier if you want to get closer to the house. If you can get close back there where you were, you're probably up on the road where the house was, beside the house, and that was the office. And I had my bedroom back there in the office. And coincidentally, the house there on Watershed Trail was shaped in an L. And Don had his bedroom at one end of the L. Carla had her bedroom in the middle of the L. And I had my bedroom at the other end of the L in the office.
yes, we used to check some original pictures in the internet in that time to locate where is exactly which place. It was very interesting. Um, do you have any favorite memories of the first sessions, or you have any favorite sessions?
Hmm. It'd be hard to say which sessions were favorite. Oh, goodness. Well, I guess what I thought was one of the things that we discovered on our own was that if Carl and I had a sexual energy exchange before the Raw session, that the session would be longer because it would increase her vital energy. And we didn't discover that until after session 16, when we knew that we had a sexual energy exchange, because session 16 was 62 questions long. And that was the longest one we'd had. And I guess another thing that we discovered as time went on, that occasionally when we would ask how the questioning had been, what we can do to make the instrument more comfortable, improve the contact, Rob would say something like, well, the candle is 2/10 of a degree out of proper alignment. And we thought there's no way in the world we could measure 2/10 of a degree for an object like that. So we thought they're talking about some other kind of alignment. They're talking about maybe our line of questioning. And because the raw contact was a product of free will, they couldn't tell us, well, your questioning wasn't very good that way, guys, gal. So shape it up. They would say the alignment is out of line. So we finally figured that out and tried to be more careful. So we didn't ask about transient information that wouldn't be valuable now and 10,000 years from now. And we tried to stay away from anything that had to do with fear-based questions. So it took a while to learn that, but because Ra gave us those clues, we were able to figure it out.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Yeah. Okay, then let's start with a question which we wrote down during the studying. I will just read it because they're sometimes a bit longer. In the session 26, Ra mentions that unique vibration complex you have called the spirit complex, which we understand as a mind-body-spirit complex instead of just saying spirit. Why the correction? Is there any explanation for this? Does the spirit also have a triad like the body, in brackets, body, mind, spirit? Was this a typo, or was there something you came to understand throughout the session?
Well, that's a good question. I took a look at that and I noticed that they also, right before that, referred to the body as the body mind spirit complex. And I had never really thought about that before either, because I would think that the body would simply be considered mind, body, spirit complex. But I think that what Ra was talking about is they looked at the spirit complex the same as the soul. And they saw a difference between that and the mind, body, spirit complex. So I think really you could substitute the word soul instead of spirit complex, and it would make more sense. But you've got a good question there. I had never really looked at it that carefully before.
Uh, Thank you. Gabriel, if you have any addendum to it or want to ask any follow-up question, just feel free to do so.
Yeah, no, I was interested in Jim's take on that, and that kind of makes a lot of sense to imagine or realize that what they were talking about was the soul instead of the spirit complex. And that way it will retain the mind, body, spirit complex because in time space, which is how I perceive the way they spoke about the soul, and correct me if I'm wrong there, Jim, the way you're explaining it, that soul is the mind, body, spirit complex that still is obviously um, a real complex in time space. Is that what you're
Right.
saying, Jim?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that would make more sense. And I guess I would just check with you, Jim, and my view of the spirit complex. The spirit complex being, of course, the shuttle, the channel, the opening of the mind body with intelligent infinity or simply self-awareness. And so the
Right.
spirit complex would just be a an opening of the mind body to self-awareness, thus creating the capacity for yeah, just spiritual evolution, as we call it. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yes. I think the spirit is the least distorted of our mind, body, spirit complex. The spirit is something that is more comprehensive in its expression of the nature of the creator of the universe. And our mind is something that we bring with us as a spirit or a soul into our incarnation. And we travel through the incarnation in a second density creature that we call the body. So basically, the body is a creature of the mind, and the mind is a creature of the spirit or the soul.
Would it be, I'll ask you, Jim, would it be appropriate to, because this is how it seems to me, the way we, because you said the spirit is the least distorted of the complexes of the mind, body, spirit complex. So all spirits, of course, all the spirit complexes are in essence the same because is a channeling of intelligent infinity. And it's the mind that distorts it in its biases and preferences to create the experience of body mind. And that's why the spirit is the least distorted. I would even say any distortion that we see in the spirit is just created by the mind's perception and not really by the spirit complex. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah, I think that that's true. We try to understand what the spirit is. We try to understand what its function is. And the more we are awakened as a spiritual seeker, the more we know about that. But I don't think that we ever completely comprehend the entire nature of it, because I think it has more to do with the total unity with the one creator and more of a perfect expression of that creator and how it all is part of everything that there is. That all of us are the creator, and there's nothing that isn't the creator. Eventually, we come to know that, but it takes a while.
Yeah, that reminds me of something that I couldn't understand at that time. What Ra, I think it was Ra who said it. Maybe I'm mixing it with some other Confederation channeling, where they said that the infinity of the spirit is greater than the infinity of consciousness or something like that.
Right, because consciousness comes from the spirit or the creator.
I have no further input, Daniel.
Good question.
Thanks. I love to follow your conversations. So let's go to the next question. The next question is another question is about the manipulation of energy and the appearance of UFOs in the skies. During session 23, Ra's appearance seemed normal. What are your thoughts on the sightings happening nowadays?
That's a good question. We really haven't gotten any information about that. Nobody's really asked too much in our public channeling meditations. Austin is really the one who has made a study of UFOs. And I think that what he's come up with so far is that it's very likely that there's more of an awakening going on planet Earth now, that UFOs have always had a role in. By if people can see them, then they might say, well, where is that from? Is it something beyond what we have here on Earth? And then when they start that type of questioning, their spiritual journey has begun. Because if you look at our planet here as being the ultimate of all of the reality of the Creator, then that's kind of a restricted point of view. But if you can see beyond what happens here on Earth, there might be higher intelligence and a direction in which we may be going, then I think the UFOs play a role in that. And so that's just Austin's opinion. And I think he would have a lot more to say about it than I can remember what he said. But I think that does make sense.
Yeah, I believe also that we will see this more frequently now until there's no other way to make it publish it openly. So we have several incidents in the United States already this year, and I think it will continue like that. I guess that Gabriel have on that topic
Yes,
now for the uh
You want me to go first or Obi?
yeah, you go first.
Yeah, so I'm going to build on Jim's answer. For those who don't know Austin's research recently, I was lucky to attend last year's homecoming, and I was able to see his presentation. I think it's brilliant, actually, because it illustrates how the human mind has always reported to see all kinds of creatures and even devices in the past. And knowing that we are a collective consciousness, a collective mind on planet Earth, it's easier for me to see that where we derive our biases and our views of the world are influenced by the collective view of what is. And so, where in the past we have seen all kinds of creatures, angelic creatures, elves, and all these metaphysical entities, it seems like now our collective consciousness, and that used to be mysterious, right? Now the mystery has become more technological, and this is what Austin is presenting with his theory, that because we have a more technological view of the world and we see that which is mysterious beyond our technology. And I think this may also have been influenced by the fact that, yes, as Ra says, there has been some visitors here in the past and they have seen these ships. So it's almost like an imprint already in the collective consciousness. And now that we are more accustomed to this, it seems like that's the prevalent view. But the most important thing is what Jim reminded us of, which is the purpose of these sightings, and is to ignite in the seeker, who may not even be a seeker at the time, the interest in the mysterious. What is beyond this experience? And in that mystery, there is a calling to the deepest possible mystery, which is, who am I? What is the creator? What is God? What is the most mysterious thing? And time and again, we've always seen that the mystical question of simply who am I is the most mysterious question that exists. Nothing else. Everything else can be explained through concepts, ideas, theories, hypotheses, and so on. But who am I will never, ever be answered. And I think it makes a beautiful bridge between the last question and this one, because that's the spirit complex. That's where we engage in this self-inquiry. And that's where we find the answer, which is not conceptual, but rather a true understanding of who we are beyond ideas, concepts, theories, hypotheses, and everything else. So I would say that, in my opinion, because the consciousness is shifting, then there is a what I would call a higher permeability within all of our minds to be susceptible to see all these mysterious callings, all these advertisements, as they used to call it in the material. Because what's being advertised really is the creator itself as it moves through the permeability of fourth density, if we can call it that. So that's what I would attribute the sightings based on what I know of the law of one, which makes a lot of sense, and building on Austin's view that, yeah, we people still see angels and gnomes and elves because they're still in the collective consciousness, and there are still mysterious sightings that provoke the same feeling of seeking. So, yeah, I think that that would wrap up my whole view on this whole phenomenon that we're seeing right now.
Thank you, Gabriel. Then we have a question now from Obi. May I ask your question, and please indicate also who you want to answer first, please.
Yes, hello. Thank you all very much. I just have a follow-up question on the UFO phenomena, because I remember reading in the Law of One that mainly the negative entities would show themselves. So I wanted to ask, is this still actual information that so most sightings, if they are real, are service to self beings, or is it changing right now?
Do you want me to try to answer that?
Yes, please, Jim.
Okay. That is a very good question. And we don't have any current information about that. Back during the raw contact, they said most of them were, as you said, negatively oriented. And I would imagine the negatively oriented ones have not gone away. So just what the ratio is, I wouldn't know. But I would think that whatever the person who sights the UFO feels within his or her being as a result of seeing the UFO is of the most importance. That if they feel that there's something about the nature of their existence that they want to know more about, or the nature of reality here, then, whether it was positive or negative, then it's a positive response.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gabriel, you want to add something to that, or?
I'm just going to reinforce what Jim said at the end. Everything that happens in our lives, not even UFOs, but just anything that happens that may be considered negative, has the potential for us to move in the direction of choice. So, experiences are neutral. They're absolutely neutral. It doesn't matter where it comes from. To me, they're all, once the seeker has opened the eye to use every single experience to move in the direction of the choice, which is choiceless choice for most of us, then we can use all types of experiences for empowering that. And I think it's the reaction that we have within our own minds and interaction with the world that really shines whatever we make out of the experience. So, yeah, whatever the experience may be, mysterious or not, is just catalyst for us to move in the direction that we pick.
Thank you, Gabriel. So then let's quickly go to the next questions. Jim, do you have any idea on how we could better grasp the concept of space-time and time-space? Are higher self and, in effect, all forms of higher self guidance of or confederation primarily existing in one of these? And when they reach out to us, where exactly are they? Also, when we sleep or dream, where are we about these two realms?
Well, I think all of our guidance, whether it's higher self or the three guides that Ra talked about, the male, female, and androgynous, are in time space. And time space is the metaphysical realm, it's the spiritual realm. Where we exist is space time, When we're in our sleep and dreams, I believe the dreams also take part in time, space, the spiritual realms, so that when we are dreaming a certain kind of dream, however long it may seem to take in the dream, it's probably a much longer time in time and space than we would actually think about it in space time. So, and I believe our higher self is also in time space, helping us as we ask time space, the higher self to do. So I think that in meditation, we can also enter into the time space nature of our own being and make contact with the creator, that still small voice within us. And we may not find that contact produces any words, although it could. But as Carla said, most of what the creator says to us in our time space is too deep for thoughts, too deep for words, cannot be described by them. It is something we have to absorb intuitively or with our subconscious mind, and then let the results of that be interpreted by our conscious mind, hopefully more and more correctly as time goes on. I think that we have those various ways of communicating with the time space portion of ourself and entities in time space communicating with us in both our dreams, meditations when we're in time space. And then we can use that information in our space time experience to move forward on our spiritual journeys.
Thank you. In this case, I have a follow-up question. When we are going into the meditation and getting at the current point, we are getting a message from our higher self, which is in time space. Where exactly I can assume the higher self is? Is it fourth, fifth, or sixth density? Yeah, any thoughts on that?
Ross said our higher self is at the mid sixth density level, and it has what we might see as a roadmap for us to travel. It has many different roads that we could select. And if we ask for assistance, then we might get hints from our higher self as to the road we're on, whether to continue it or to try a different approach or a different interpretation of the road. So that's basically it. And then we also have contact, can have contact with our higher self's higher self, which is our mind, body, spirit complex totality that is in the seventh density, that is more approaching the unification with the creator. And when it is communicating with the higher self, then it also is giving the higher self information that can be shared with us.
That's very interesting. Thank you very much. Gabriel, any thoughts from you on that?
Yeah, I would like to offer a view which is the non-dual perspective of reality, because what we're trying to do with this question is to explore the nature of experience or the nature of reality. It's not that we are contained in either space-time or time-space, but rather that time-space and space-time are contained within us. So once again, the question arises, who am I? Am I the individual being, or am I the creator? So I'm going to take that standpoint and say, I am the creator, and that means that I am that which contains both time, space, and space time. In practical terms, this means I am the awareness of both mind and body. As Jim correctly said to my view, time space contains everything that we can attribute to the mind: imagination, dreams, that which we see in meditation, anything that is within the mind, space time, everything that is the physical. And it is not that we are in space time or time space, is that these two inevitable aspects of experience, they're within us. And this resolves I guess, the confusion or the problem of identity, which is the only thing that needs to be corrected. And then we see that it is attention, my attention, what brings me to either space-time or time-space. And when I say me, I mean I awareness. Awareness moves into space-time and moves into time-space, which is within itself. And it just pays attention to whatever it finds. I think it's a great follow-up question, what you did, Daniel, about the higher self, and I'll just give another input in there. I like to call it higher intelligence, because again, I want to stand as the creator and not as an individual being that is communicating with some other self. And Ra gave suggestions of this, which the higher self is you in your idea of the future, which is not really a future. It is you as the complete being that you are. And the way this creates, to me, an interaction between us is that what we normally consider ourselves to be is this limited individual being. And so the higher intelligence is obviously in the structure of densities at the highest point in which there is, again, to my understanding, a level of communication between the lower perception of self and the highest before it gets dissolved. And so this is why I love what Jim also said about Carla saying that, yes, it's not about words, it's not about thoughts or concepts, because this is why states of meditation like samadhi is simply abiding in awareness, which is soaking attention back into its source. And there is no concepts, there is no words, there are no forms there. There is just pure infinite awareness. And that's where I would agree that the whatever voice of the creator may come up, it's because it's coming from that level of awareness. So that higher intelligence that I see is obviously the the quickest way for our lives to be more merged with this understanding. And it's always calling back. That's why no matter whatever culture we have or upbringing, everybody that undergoes a disciplined meditation, which is what the Confederation always suggests as the highest practice, constant discipline meditation, we all have the same change. We all have the same change in direction. And that is to be more congruent with the concept and the integration and living of unity, or perhaps more appropriately, no separation.
Well said. Well said.
Thank you very much. I much enjoy the input from both of you. And let's go to the next question. During the earlier sessions, we can read that Carla occasionally used psychoactive substances, so-called LSD. How did you all navigate this topic throughout the sessions, and what is your current perspective on these substances? Did you notice any changes related to their use, aside from the increased vulnerability to psychic attacks?
Carla had two experiences with LSD. And for most people, LSD, if it was taken during the session, Ross said, would help to energize the session. But she took it before the session so that it was wearing off. And so because she took it twice, it wore off her vital energy to the extent that she wasn't able to have sessions as long as usual. And from what we understood, the fellow who shared the LSD with her was, you might say, manipulated or directed by negative forces to do that, because they knew that Carla, having low body energy to start with due to rheumatoid arthritis, could be tempted to do more than she should. And that was basically what happened, was that she wouldn't detune by becoming separated from the fellow who gave her the LSD. She continued to give praise to the creator for the experience she was having. But she did stay awake and working in the office longer afterwards so that her energies were depleted. And that's why book 2 of the Law of One, which you'll be coming to shortly, is much shorter than the other books. She didn't have the energy to do that. And from my own experience with LSD when I was in the hippie generation back in the early 70s, I took LSD one evening. I was living in Jacksonville, Florida, and I took a walk around the neighborhood. It's kind of twilight, and everything was beautiful. The nature's spirits were sparkling around me, and I was having a great time. And I got back to my apartment, and I laid down to rest on my bed, and I heard a message in my head that said, "You don't have to be stoned to be here." So after that, I stopped taking LSD. And I think that what we've gotten recently in our Quo channelings here in my home is that any type of use of a drug like ayahuasca, wachuma, LSD just gives you an idea of what you can do without the drug. So it's just a hint. It's not a great idea to continue taking it. Just use that hint and make that journey yourself.
That's a very beautiful view on that. And that state which you reach there, that you can reach it during the meditation, or how you see it?
I think basically that is what anybody can do on their spiritual path. At some point, you can have some kind of an enlightening experience, some type of feeling of unity with the Creator, unity with the people around you. And that is an acceleration of the spiritual journey to see the nature of the creation. We're all one being. We're all the Creator. There's nothing but the Creator.
Thank you very much. We scratched that topic already previously in our study session, but I would like to Gabriel also to share his thoughts on that.
So James said something that resonates with my understanding of psychedelics or in entheogens. I think I'll quote Alan Watts when he said that um, maybe I'm paraphrasing or maybe I'm just adding it to myself, but there's a reason why they call it medicine, not a diet. Shouldn't be dieting on them. Um, and if you take it once and you get the message, then hang up the phone. Um, I think the effects, obviously, and I'll just get scientific here because I love it. What we have seen in psychedelics is that they impair the default mode network, which is basically how the brain reacts to self-referential thought, me, myself, and all this, which is the majority of people, the majority of us are engaged in these thoughts, right? And when this is inhibited or suppressed, then again, because it's disabled, the mind doesn't stop, obviously, and our attention can only go to these realms of the mind that are obscured, I would say, by the self-referential thought, by what we call the ego, which is not an entity. It's just simply a seemingly constant image that we have of ourselves. And this is why the message that is, I would say, floating all around in our minds is always stop referencing yourself as a limited being, which, I mean, in other words, is just remember who you are. You are the creator. You are God. You're infinite. And so it's to me, it's very common that people would have, or likely that people would, in these stages, would get that message. And a follow-up message to that, which is the repeated one, is yes, like Jim said, find this now. You don't need this. And the way this integrates is that in meditation, once again, discipline meditation, we look at the brain, what happens? Default mode network, self-referential thought, gone, dissolved. It weakens. And so the same effect that it happens through psychedelics, it's a constant state now. We don't depend on anything. We're constantly in that state. And I would say that that feeling of ease and peace and just reassurance, which can also be chaotic in psychedelic experiences, as we know, it's a commonplace. It's just simply ordinary experience that contains this because it's a change in perspective that we sustain. And it doesn't need to be induced by an activity or some sort of exterior exogenous substance or anything that produces this. It's coming from within. So, if anything, I think it's actually the same message as we get from sightings of UFOs or angels or any other um, supernatural creature. It's the same message. You know, look at the most mysterious part of reality, and that's you. And the more you do that, the more this just switches and changes and transforms our experience in life. So, yeah, that's my view on psychedelics. I think, like you said, I've shared a couple of times.
Thank you, Gabriel. Uh, as well, interesting again to hear it. So now we're coming to our last question, which we have already written down. After this question, you can ask your question by yourself to Jim or Gabriel. So this last question is coming somehow from the team, and I'll read it as well. We are curious to know if you have any behind-the-scene insights from this period or things you observe as a team during those first 26 sessions. How did life begin to unfold for you all? Did catalysts present themselves in the instruments triad during that time? Also, did you already know that you were going to publish these sessions as a book? Or how did the process begin? We think it would be wonderful to learn how the journey started. Tim.
Well, I think I probably already covered how the journey started. It was something that was totally unexpected. And as the journey continued, it was just like we couldn't believe our good fortune to have contact with those of Rob because um, when I was living in the woods of central Kentucky and driving up to Louisville to join Don and Carla in the beginning when they lived in Douglas Boulevard, they were channeling those of Latwii. But Carla had started channeling those of Hatan in 1974 of the fourth density of love and understanding. And then in 1978, when I first started coming up there, she had gotten advanced information from Latwii of the fifth density of wisdom. So when the raw contact began, raw as being of the sixth density was just a total leap of joy and faith forward in the specific nature of the information, the inspirational nature. And we could not believe that it was actually happening to us because, as Don said, when I first came in contact with him after the first session, this is what we've been waiting 19 years for. And that's when Don had his first experiment with students in the physics class about could they learn how to channel if they meditated every week and so forth. So we just felt like we were, so blessed. We were climbing a very high mountain, and there didn't seem to be any end to it. And that was pretty much the case for most of the raw contact. We kind of went a little overboard with 75 sessions in the first year. Sometimes during the first month, we had 2 sessions in a day, and we discovered that wasn't a good idea. Even though Ra said it was possible, but they never said it was a good idea because it tended to wear Carla out in some ways. So the first year was great. The second year, I think we got down to 25 sessions, which was probably a more appropriate number of sessions to consider Carla's vital energy and the energy of the group. And of course, as you know, the last year was a time where Don went into a place of mental instability, and they had that. We moved to north of Atlanta, Georgia, Cumming, Georgia, to try to get closer to Don's home base as an Eastern Airline pilot. And it turned out to be a really bad mistake because the house we finally settled on was north of Georgia and north of Atlanta. And it took longer to drive there than it did to fly there from Louisville. And at the time that we were there, Don and Carla had what Ra called the deleterious energy exchange, where Carla could see that Don was worried about Eastern Airlines, whether it was going to keep going very long. It looked like it was failing financially. He wouldn't have any way of supporting our group. And he was worried about all kinds of things. So she said, why don't you let me take over all of those things that you're worried about? Let me be the strong one. You be like me, weak and foolish. And unknowing that his saying yes to that would cause a deleterious energy exchange, he said yes. And that began his decline. And after that point, there was just everything about Don that had been one way before was different. He didn't see hawks as being a sign of yes, do that, what you're supposed to, what you're doing. And so eventually we did move back to Kentucky to the home I'm living in here now. And we were here for 7 months before Don decided that he did not want to have to go back. He'd put himself into the hospital, a mental hospital, he knew he was having trouble. And so he put himself in the hospital, and the psychiatrist that was supposed to be working with him didn't want to work with him because Don said that he really didn't feel like talking that day. But rather than go ahead and continue talking, he just left him. And then he went on a vacation for 3 weeks. So eventually Don just kind of faked it that he was well, and they let him out of the hospital. But on the way home, he said, nothing's changed. Every day's worse than the last. And he decided to the last that he didn't want to die in the hospital. So he told me that he was considering killing himself. So I signed a mental inquest warrant to see if we could get him back into the hospital and work with him some more. But as you know, when the police came to the door, Don went outside and shot himself. And after that, then Carl and I knew that that was the end of the raw contact. And we decided that since we had shared the spiritual journey up to that point together, we would continue it and continue working with Confederation philosophy. And 2 years later, the raw contact, or not the raw contact, but the Quo contact came by. And it turned out that Quo was a principle that included Hatan of the fourth density, Latui of the fifth density, and Ra of the sixth density in a step down fashion, which did not require trance, but it wasn't as specific an information. So that has been ongoing to this day. And as my spiritual work of each day, I have the Camelot journal entry where I work with the Quo channelings. There, Carla completed 1,600 sessions with those of Quo. And now I think I'm on year 2004. And they started, by the way, back in 1986. So that's the way it went. And so in Don's memory, we continue holding the sessions here. And in Carla's memory, it'll be 10 years this coming April 1st that she passed into larger life.
Wow, very much thank you for the deep insights. Do you have any ever experience or thought that any answer from the principle of Quo was more likely from Ra from any other of the entities?
Could you restate that? I don't quite understand your question.
That you have experience through the channelings with Quo, that you think any answer which you received was more likely from Ra than any of the other entities?
Well, what we've been told by those of Quo is that the voice for Quo during our channelings comes from Latui of the fifth density, but they're collecting information from Hatan of the fourth density and also of Ra. But as I said before, the information they get from Ra is not as specific, but it's still coming through.
Thank you. And at which point exactly you as a team or Don decided that you are publishing that information of the Ra channeling?
We self-published the first, I guess we did the first 4 books. There was a group in, what was that? Minnesota, Palmer Publications. Yeah. And those are the 8.5 by 11 blue notebooks with the gold lettering. Book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4. And then later, when I'd been living on the land, I had read the material by Jane Roberts, Seth Speaks. And I had written her a couple of letters about how much I appreciated what she had to say. And she actually wrote me back, in the old handwriting and deliverable mail. No computers back in those days. So that after we'd published the books via Palmer Publications, I wrote her a letter and I enclosed the first 10 sessions. I said, do you have any idea of a publisher that we could get that would be a commercial type of publisher? And she let us know about Whitford Press, or the Donning Company, which at that time I believe was located somewhere in Virginia. So our first books were published by the Donning Company. And then later, Schiffer Publications bought out the Donning Company, and our books were all published by Schiffer. And then in 1998, we took the material that we had considered personal material. We took it out of any books that we published and kept it to ourselves because we thought it wouldn't have any meaning to anybody else. And it was just personal material. But Carl and I decided in 1998 that material would have value to anybody else because we were just like anybody else. We have the honor of being channels for those of Ra and those of Quo, but it would be a good idea if we published that. So we did. It became book 5 of the Law of One. And I've always enjoyed that book more than any other book because Carl and I both wrote our opinions about what was being channeled through her by Ra, so that readers could get 2 different points of view of what was being said.
Thank you very much. Do you have any specific memory in the beginning of the channeling when you recognized by yourself that the information you received having an impact and a change on your perception of your own life?
I think every session was another facet of my journey, another step on that journey. Just feeling the inspiration, the power of the words made me feel like I was living in a golden light. And I think that has been a continuing part of my journey because every morning, as I finish my first meditation, I read a couple pages from what we now call the Raw Contact. And then in the evening, as I'm having my dinner, I also read a couple more pages just before that. So it's just like revisiting a spiritual path. But most of the time, as Carla said, that as you go through the material, you can read the same material twice or 3 times or 4, however many times you do. But each time you yourself are at a different level of your own journey, and you perceive the information in different ways so that it expands for you. And so I think that's been the case for me as well.
I can confirm that because I experience the same. So sometimes I have a feeling that I'm reading a different book, but it's the same book. But as you said, you are on a different level already. So, and it gives you a different perception of the material or the information you're reading. Gabriel, do you have any question you want to add or any comments?
I am good for now. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Gabriel. So then is the time that the participants can ask their personal questions to Jim or to Gabriel. That doesn't have to be necessary in connection with the first sessions or first book. You can ask also anything related to the spiritual material. And yes, we have Obi again. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Um, I wanted to thank Jim also for the things he said, especially about Dawn. And maybe my first question would be in the hectic times we have now, especially with with the development, the politics with Trump and the right wings in Europe. Would you say it's important to pay attention to that, or it's part of the game and it doesn't matter so much?
I think it's important to see that the purpose of third density is to make a choice. It's the density of choice, positive or negative. And if you see things happening in the world around you that you are not in synchronicity with, you feel they're negatively oriented, just realize that this is the purpose of the planet. The purpose of the third density is to make that choice. And make that choice every day for yourself more positively by being of service to people around you, your neighbors, your friends, your workplace, school you're at, wherever you are. Do what you can to cast a vote for positivity, because we all have the power to affect the consciousness of people around us by the love we share with them from our open hearts. And this is the time when we can help so many people that are confused, are angry, are in distress, and let them know that this is the purpose of this third density, and to travel that path that you're on ever more firmly, ever more joyfully, ever more open-hearted, and be of service however you can, whether it's shoveling the walk of the snow off your neighbor's yard, you're helping somebody at the grocery store get their groceries into the car, small service, large service, doesn't matter. It's service. So that's my suggestion.
Any follow-up question, Obi, on your... You have to unmute your microphone when you want to talk to us.
No, I don't think so. Thank you very much for your answer. I think I got it. Maybe another question, but you don't have to answer if you don't feel like it. You think negative beings have something to do with Dawn's development, or it was just bad?
I have a friend, a feeling that our friend of negative fifth density was probably there when Don was thinking about taking his life and encouraging him to do so. Because the negative entities, when they have a psychic attack or psychic greeting, as Ra called them, can't do it by themselves. You have to make an opening somehow. And I think that Don's opening the feeling of, this was the worst day yet. I didn't want to die in a hospital, was probably enhanced by our negative friend. And that's just my thought, my opinion. I know also that, I guess, a few months before Don died, that he asked me if I thought it'd be possible to make an agreement with our negative friend to leave Carla alone. And I said, well, you might try, and they might say or he or she might say they will, but can you believe them? So I don't know. I think there probably was some effect there, but it had to be Don's choice first.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question, Obi. Yeah, with that agreement, also not sure if that one is reliable from such entities or not. They maybe say yes in the beginning and then go after the others. Any other questions from the participants? Then feel free to ask. Adam, go ahead, unmute your microphone.
Hi, Jim. Good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Did he?
So my question is is about Dawn. And so I'm wondering, do you know why Dawn chose to be celibate? Was it based on um, a spiritual practice, or was it I've always wondered what was his motivation to be celibate?
Well, I can't say for sure, but Carla thought that it was probably the fact that he was very meticulous in his behavior and the things that were around him, cleanliness, and he just didn't like the body fluids that were involved in the sexual energy exchanges. So after about 6 months, he decided he'd be celibate. I personally think that maybe it was a pre-incarnative choice so that Carl and I could pursue that feeling of attraction of a sexual and a spiritual nature as well. And it wouldn't be any problem for Don. And it wasn't.
Did it answer your question, Adam, or you have a follow-up question on that?
Yeah, thank you. That answers my question.
So then, if there is no other participant, I will give the word to. Okay, we have Ashley now. Ashley, feel free to unmute your microphone and ask your question.
Thank you. Hi, Jim. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to
Thank
see
you
you.
for being here. Thank you for your wisdom and your love. Um, I wonder, do you feel that it's possible to transcend duality while still in 3D? Do you feel like truly, like you can psychologically and emotionally reach that point where you're not on the side of moving towards love or away from love, but you're right in the middle? Like, is it possible to enter that sixth density awareness and beingness while still in a body and still surrounded by catalyst? I feel like it is very powerful and very beneficial, but I still find myself naturally wanting to lean more towards love, more towards positivity, more towards service. So, like, being very polarized in my walk, but understanding that the ideal would be to go neither one way or the other, but to be in the center, to be at that still point where you're the resolution of all paradoxes embodied. Do you think that's possible here?
I think it is possible. I mean, many people have reported having these types of unitive experiences or illuminations, feelings of being one with all. And I think that that's basically what Ra was talking about when they were saying that if we could make contact with intelligent infinity, if we could use the spirit as a shuttle from our indigo ray energy center to the violet ray in the intelligent infinity of the one creator, that we can have those experiences. So I think that is possible.
I've definitely felt those unity moments, and I feel them more so as the catalyst has increased on this planet. And so it is that unity with all things, like everything's my family, everything is a reflection of me. Where every blade of grass, where every you know the paper cup discarded on the sidewalk, that's us too, and it's full of love, and it's one big love fest. But so would you say that that unity point, that feeling of oneness with everything, that all is my family, that is the transcendence, that is the the beyond duality? Because to me that still feels like a STO positive polarity, so you're on one side, but is that actually the union point?
I think you probably are correct with that. I think that eventually that feeling of unity can expand to include everybody and everything, just like you were saying. I think that those
Mm.
experiences that you're talking about are probably answers to your own question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So then we have another question from Obi. Obi, you want to ask another question? Okay, West went off. Is he back? Okay, he just disappeared. Oh, he's back now online. Obi, you can ask the question.
Great, thanks. I'm just curious, did you have contact with Dawn's soul or Carla's soul, and do you know or did you try to find out whether they are reincarnated?
You mean after they passed into larger life?
Yeah.
Well, as far as Carla goes, I've had a number of contacts with her in dreams and in meditation, and they've been very inspiring, been very helpful on my spiritual journey. When Carla was alive, we had a friend. Well, actually, when we got married, my best man was Ron Clay, and Carla's matron of honor was his wife, Sonia Clay. And a year after Don died, Sonia and Ron were making love. And after they were through, Sonia said, Ron, I'm pregnant, and it's Don. And so about 9 months later, their son, Kenneth, was born. And when he was 5 years old, I was taking him on a trip in my truck up to a place in northern Kentucky. We had a little old farm there, abandoned farm called Avalon. And as we were riding along in the truck, Kenneth looked up at the sky and he said, you see those clouds moving there? They're not moving as fast as you think they are because the Earth's rotating on its axis. So he put his hand up like this and he says, it's doing like this. And I thought, well, that's pretty good thinking for a 5-year-old. And then a few minutes later, he saw a jet plane go across the sky and he says, do you know why a jet plane can fly? And I said, Kenneth, do you know why a jet plane can fly? He says, yes, because there's more air pressure under the wings than over the wings. So I thought, that's something that Don would know. But so Carl and I always thought that Kenneth was the reincarnation of Don, because when you commit suicide, you have to come back and finish the lessons that you didn't finish when you were in that body. So curiously enough, Don was 6 feet 5 inches and Kenneth was 6 feet 5 inches. And Don, at the age of 26, had decided that he didn't want to be tossed around by the highs and lows that everybody else was going through, really joyful and then sad, joyful and sad. So he decided he was just going to be an observer. And what that meant was that he was closing his heart. And very intelligent, but he closed his heart. So Kenneth has a very big heart. He's a lovely soul, and he's into meditation, and he knows that some people have told him, well, you might be the reincarnation of Don Elkins. And he says, whatever. So that's the story.
Thank you very much. Just one follow-up question. You in connection with Kenneth nowadays?
Yes, every now and then I hear from Kenneth with a Christmas card. His sister, Casey, lives just across the river in southern Indiana. And I get to hear from her now and then. She and her husband and daughter came over here last September to bury a cat that had passed into larger life, we hope. And so I have a pet cemetery that we bury them in. And I haven't heard from Corey. She lives out in Washington. So I'm not sure how she's doing. So those are the 3 children that Ron and Sonia had.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
What a really great story. Thank you for sharing it with us. As we are approaching the end of our call today, I would like to ask maybe Gabriel first and after Jim to give us some summarized closing words today for today's session.
I will give my honor to Jim to do the final words.
Well, Gabriel, you're just as inspirational as I am. I enjoy hearing what you have to say. Are you sure you want to give it away?
I
Okay.
want to hear you. Yes.
Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate being able to talk about the law of one, about Don and Carla and Ra, and how the law of one has affected us, and how I have heard from people around the world how their lives have been changed by the law of one. It's been food for their soul, grist for their mill, and helped them make every step upon their spiritual journey. And it's been such an honor for me to have been part of that contact and to be part of this type of a meeting with people who, like you, who are on that journey. We all share this journey together, the journey of the open heart. If we can see that creator within each other and within ourselves, at least 51% of the time, then we can make a social memory complex and move forward on our spiritual paths. And that is a journey I look forward to making with all of you. And I know that we're making it together. Thank you for all being part of this podcast today. It has been an honor for me. And I love you all.